Stitch number 27 is actually 2 stitches. It is French knot and pistil stitch. Pistil as the thing in a flower, not the thing you shoot things with. So here's another example. French knots. And here we have the pistil stitch, which is, maybe as you can tell, it's just a French knot with a bit of a tail on it. When you're working the French knot and the pistil stitch as well, I would recommend using a shorter thread than normal. Because of how this stitch is worked, the thread gets twisted quite a lot, and that means that it can easily start to twist itself in ways you don't want, and then it will tie itself into knots, which you also don't want. So let's start with the French knot. Come up from the back of the fabric. So usually when I'm doing French knot, I actually rest my hoop against myself, but it's a little bit awkward for how I'm sitting and doing this. But if you can, rest it against yourself and use just a couple of fingers to hold it, so that you have the rest of your non-stitching hand free, because you will need both hands. I know some people start the stitch with the hoop and the fabric lying on the table, and you can do that, but I find that it's less reliable, because then you have to hold the thread and the tension of the knot while you're lifting the hoop to get to the back. So I'll show you the way I do French knots. So what is important is to have on your non-stitching hand, so in my case the left hand, I have my thumb and my index finger free, because they're holding the thread, and it's important to have good tension on this stitch. So I'm holding the thread between my thumb and my index finger, with my thumb on top. And really all I need to do the stitch is here. I don't need the rest of the thread, so I'm holding it down this way so that it's out of the way. You could hold it this way, but then there's risk of catching it as you carry on. So I hold it like this, and then I come from the back of the thread and I wrap the needle around the thread instead of wrapping the thread around the needle, and that is so I can keep the tension on the thread. So now that I have wrapped the needle around the thread, I have 2 loops of thread on my needle, and then I'm going to put my index finger on my right hand on those loops of thread, and they should sit around 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch from the tip of the needle, so that you can hold on to it and it won't fall off. So now I'll put my finger on it. It's safe. I can move stuff around if I need to, and it won't fall off. And notice that I'm still holding with my left hand. The tension is still the same. So now I insert the needle just next to where I came up. For this kind of thread I wouldn't go in the same hole because there is a risk that you'll pull the knot through to the back. So insert the needle just a thread or two away from where you came up. So once you've inserted the tip of the needle, you can let go with your right hand. And now this is important. This is what makes the stitch. You want to push these loops down so they touch the fabric. And then with your left hand, you pull the thread so that the loops sit tightly around the needle. And then you keep holding with your left hand as you push the needle through. There we go. And that's the first French knot. So let's do another one. So I'm holding my thread, and what I don't need, I'm holding out of the way. And then I come from the back of the thread and wrap the needle around the thread. Put my index finger onto the knot, and then I can guide the needle to insert it into the fabric. And once I have inserted about 1/2 centimeter of the needle maybe, I let go with my index finger. And then I push the thread, so that it touches the fabric. And then I pull with my left hand so that it sits tightly around the needle. And I keep holding the tension with my left hand. And then I pull the needle through. So I'll show you what happens if you don't keep the tension. Right, so I've got the thread around the needle, and then I insert the needle into the fabric, and I pull or push the thread down to touch the fabric, but I'm not going to tighten with my left hand. I'm just going to push it through. Let's see what happens. So this is not a French knot, it's just a sort of loopy thing. So if we try it again, so I come from behind, loop the thread around the needle, put my finger on the loops of thread, and insert the needle back down. Now instead of pushing the thread down, I'm just going to pull it tight, and that does make it sit almost on the fabric, so that actually makes the knot. So it's important to keep the tension right, because even if the loops do not touch the fabric, they will most likely be pulled down as you tighten the thread. So again, I come from the back of the thread and wrap the needle around the thread, put my finger on the loops, insert the needle into the fabric, and then I pull with my left hand, and the thread sits on the fabric and it sits tightly around the needle. If you make sure that the tension is tense, as it were, it's almost certain that your French knot will look right. It may take a bit of practice, that's totally fine. It definitely did for me. But keep the tension in mind. That is really important when you're doing French knots. Now let's try the pistol stitch. Again, for this stitch I would highly recommend using a shorter thread than normal, because it's worked in exactly the same way as the French knot, just with one slight change. So again, I'm coming from the back of the thread, wrap my needle around the thread, put my finger on the loops so it's totally secure. I've got my finger on it so it can't fall off the needle. So now, instead of inserting the needle into the fabric just next to where I came up, I'm going to insert it, I don't know, about 1/2 centimeter away. But again, the tension, I'm holding the tension with my left hand as I'm inserting the needle. So that's the pistol stitch. It's just a French knot with a long tail. So let's do another one. I hold my tension with the left hand, come from the back of the thread and wrap the needle around the thread. Put my finger on the loops, and then I insert the needle a little distance away. And I keep holding the tension with my left hand as I insert the needle back into the fabric. Like that. Let's try it on the alphabet sampler. So here I've drawn a few pistol stitches. So what I'm going to do is, so I've come up at what will be the end of the tail of the pistol stitch, and then I wrap the needle around the thread, put my finger on the loops, and then I insert the needle where I want the French knot part of the stitch to sit. And even though this is quite long, the thread here, I'm still holding the tension. Like that. Can do another one. So where I come up, that is the end of the tail of the stitch, and where I insert the needle, that's the head, I guess, of the stitch. So as you're working to fill in this ampersand, I would start by working an area with the pistol stitches, and then when you feel like you can't fit in any more pistol stitches, then come in and fill the gaps with the French knots so that you get an even fill across the shape of pistol stitches, and then filled in with the French knots. Some of the stitches I have lined up so that they follow the outline of the shape, both the pistol stitches and the French knots. And then there's a few cases where I have added a few straight stitches where I didn't feel like I could fit in a French knot, just to fill in the gaps. If French knots have been your nemesis before, just try them. Take it easy. And don't worry if they don't look perfect, but what is perfect anyway? If they don't look perfect to start with, we all start somewhere, and usually French knots look less than perfect when we start. Mine definitely did. So see if you can't manage the French knot. I'm sure you can. Happy stitching. The tutorial you have just watched is part of a series of 31 stitch tutorials that I have made to go along with the pattern for this embroidery stitch sampler. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you want to check out the pattern, you can find the link in the description. And whatever you're making, happy stitching.